1850s, some states allowed slavery and some didn't. This issue pushed America until it had no choice but to go to war with itself. The war was between the Union and the Confederacy. The Confederacy needed slaves to work on their plantations. If slavery was abolished, their economy would collapse. Abraham Lincoln was the leader of the Union, and Jefferson Davis was the leader of the Confederacy. The Civil War raged on for 4 years, from 1861 to 1865. Die, you Confederate scum! The Union won the Civil War mainly because it had a larger population than the Confederacy. After the Union prevailed, the Confederacy was deeply upset by the loss of their slaves. They were forming racial groups. Southern states were slowly admitted back into the Union, and thus ends the Civil War. In 1879, Thomas Edison produced the first light bulb, right? Wrong! The first light bulb was really created by Joseph Swan. The electrical connections are made at the bottom of the screw cap and at the side of the screw cap. The electric current then flows through the two wires and flows through the filament, generating light.
Yippee!
Thomas Edison's bulb was sealed with a vacuum so the filament wouldn't ignite. His bulb lasted 40 hours when Joseph Swan's only lasted 13.5 hours. Thomas Edison tried to improve the bulb to make it last longer by using a filament derived from bamboo. The Great Depression began on September 3rd, 1929, when the value of stocks reached a high point, then dropped sharply. People had been buying on margin, which is where they buy a share for the fraction of its price, wait for the share to become more valuable, then pay it off. Some people didn't bother to pay it off at first and just purchased more shares of stock. This increased the debt, but also increased the money that they were getting. After the crash, people simply didn't have enough money to pay it off. There were many suicides, and many people had to live on the streets homeless. I interviewed my 85-year-old grandmother about what she remembered from growing up during the Great Depression.
Well, it started in 1929 when the stock market crashed. It was very unexpected because the market had been doing very well. And it happened suddenly. People lost a lot of money. The man who was president then, Herbert Hoover, really didn't know what to do. It was just so sudden and unexpected, and he didn't do very well. But he, in 3 years after that, in 1942, I remember that date very well, Franklin Roosevelt became president. And that guy made things happen. He started things going better, a lot better. But the Depression did go on for a long time. I think people felt better about the whole thing, though, because Franklin Roosevelt was a very inspirational man. He connected with people in a way that Hoover never was able to. He would give talks on the radio, fireside chats he called it. The people really listened to, and they hung on his words. You know, something that he said in his first inaugural speech was that famous line,
"Let me assert my firm belief that the only thing we have to fear is fear itself."
Yeah, that is powerful stuff. Mm-hmm. And people can really feel a connection. So psychologically, this guy was great as far as the Depression. Even though it went on for quite a while after that, people felt better about things. And he got the government going in organizing projects to hire people. And there were things called the WPA and the CCC and the NRA. A lot of these projects Some of them didn't work, but a lot of them did. But well, I was only 5 when the Depression started, so I don't know how that felt actually, but I do remember the worry that my mother always had about money. My father was a traveling salesman, so he was always off somewhere on the road, and he had the car. We didn't have a car at home. And sometimes he would lose his job. He would be selling different things at different times. And so Mother was always worried about money. Would we have money for rent? Would we have money for food? But we were never desperate. I remember that. Money was scarce, and it was a worry. But I'm sure that was true for almost everybody in the Depression, or a lot of people. Well, when we were young. You know, another thing I thought of, I think it's really funny. I don't remember any fat people.
Can you spare a dime?
On October 4th, 1957, Americans heard the beeping of the Russian spacecraft known as Sputnik 1 on television. The craft was the first artificial satellite put into Earth's orbit. Sputnik had a diameter of 58 centimeters and carried 4 antennas. It broke down after 3 weeks when the batteries failed, but it managed to bruise our national ego. The Russians may have won the race to space, but Americans were determined to win the race to the moon. Not only that, but they were determined to put a man on the moon.
I believe that this nation should commit itself to achieving the goal, before this decade is out, of landing a man on the moon and returning him safely to the Earth.
Neil Armstrong and Buzz Aldrin are walking on the moon for 2 hours and 13 minutes.
It's one small step for man, one giant leap for mankind.
The Cold War began in 1985 after World War II. The superpowers were the United States and the Soviet Union because they both had nuclear weapons at their disposal. The Soviet Union was aiming to spread communism throughout the world. Not only that, but they had a dislike for capitalism. The United States wanted capitalism to stay in their nation. Because both the Soviet Union and the United States had nuclear weapons, neither of them had the guts to attack the other directly. This is why it was called the Cold War. There actually wasn't any fighting at all. The Cold War ended in 1991 with the collapse of the Soviet Union. The Soviet Union collapsed into 16 different national parts.